My name is Rachel Monroe Ellis. I am 37 years old, and the night my mother told a waiter that my 10-year-old son was not real family, I finally stopped begging for a place at a table that had been built to exclude us. Noah isn't part of the family package, my mother said, without even lowering her voice. The waiter froze beside her chair, holding a silver tray with 3 children's dinners arranged like little trophies. Roasted chicken for my brother's daughter, steak tips for my sister's son, and salmon for my mother's favorite granddaughter. My son sat beside me in his navy blazer, both hands folded in his lap, his certificate from the county science fair tucked carefully under his dinner plate so it would not get wrinkled. He had spent 6 months building a water-purifying filter out of clay, sand, charcoal, and recycled copper tubing. That afternoon, he had won first place at the Junior Environmental Design Showcase. The dinner was supposed to celebrate him. Instead, my mother looked at the waiter and said, "Just bring him the plain pasta. No dessert ticket. He's not one of the Monroe grandchildren." My fork slipped from my hand and hit the edge of my plate. Across the table, my brother Colin smiled like he had been waiting for this moment. My sister Tessa stared into her wine glass. My mother adjusted the pearl bracelet my father had given her 35 years earlier, and acted as though she had merely corrected a spelling mistake on a menu. Noah looked up at me and whispered, "It's okay, Mom. I'm not that hungry." That was the sentence that broke something open in me. Not because it was angry, because it was practiced. My son had learned how to shrink himself around adults who should have protected him. I put my hand over his and said, "No, sweetheart, it is not okay." Then I stood up. The private dining room at Alder House went quiet in sections. First our table, then the 2 cousins' tables, then the servers near the door. Then the older relatives who always pretended not to hear cruelty if it came wrapped in my mother's expensive manners. My mother looked up sharply. "Rachel, sit down. Do not make a scene." I looked at her, then at the long table where every Monroe name card had been printed in gold except my son's. "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm correcting the record." At exactly 7:42 p.m., the doors opened behind me. Angela Park, my father's estate attorney, stepped into the room with 2 bank officers, a trust accountant, and a woman from the county clerk's office. Angela carried a black leather folder I had signed for earlier that morning. My mother's face changed before anyone spoke. She knew that folder. She had been trying to keep me away from it for nearly 9 years. Before I tell you what was inside it and why my mother's fork fell out of her hand when I made my announcement, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always wonder how far stories like this travel, especially stories about the families who call cruelty tradition. Alder House was the kind of restaurant my family used when they wanted to impress people without admitting that was what they were doing. It sat on a hill outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in a restored brick mansion with black shutters, polished floors, and oil portraits of people nobody at our table had ever met. My mother loved the place because the staff remembered her preferred table, her preferred wine, and the fact that she liked to be addressed as Mrs. Monroe, even though my father had been dead for almost 8 years. That night was described in the family group chat as a Monroe grandchildren celebration dinner. The excuse was that 3 of the children had achievements to recognize. My brother Colin's 13-year-old daughter Harper had been accepted into a private summer theater program. My sister Tessa's 12-year-old son Miles had made the travel baseball roster. And my son Noah had won the county science fair. Only one of those achievements had actually happened that day, but my mother had insisted that all the children should feel equally special. In my family, that sentence usually meant someone else had done something impressive, and my mother needed to dilute it before anyone felt uncomfortable. Noah was not my biological child. I met him when he was 3 years old and sleeping with his shoes on at an emergency foster placement because nobody had explained to him whether he would be moved again before morning. My husband Aaron and I had been licensed foster parents for less than a year. We thought we were prepared. We had read the books, taken the classes, installed the cabinet locks, and bought the softest blue blanket we could find. Nothing prepared me for a toddler who hid crackers in pillowcases because hunger had taught him not to trust kitchens. Nothing prepared me for the first time he called me Rachel, because he had learned that mom was a word that made adults disappear. Aaron loved him immediately, carefully, without forcing closeness. He sat on the floor and built block towers Noah could knock down. He made pancakes shaped like crooked stars. He let Noah check the locks at night until the checking became a game. And then one night, Noah forgot to check. By the time Noah was 5, adoption was no longer a question. It was a formality our hearts had completed long before the court did. Aaron died 10 months before the adoption was finalized. A highway pileup during an ice storm. He was a paramedic. He climbed into wreckage to keep a man breathing until the rescue crew arrived. A second collision happened before anyone could move him. For weeks after the funeral, people told me I was brave. I hated that word. Brave made it sound like I had chosen something noble instead of waking up every morning because a little boy in dinosaur pajamas still needed breakfast. My mother's first reaction to Aaron's death was not comfort. It was calculation. Maybe this is a sign, she told me 3 days after the funeral, while condolence flowers still crowded my kitchen counter. You don't have to go through with the adoption alone. I remember looking at her and not understanding. She continued gently, as if kindness could make the words less monstrous. You are young enough to start over. Noah has already lost so much. Maybe another family with 2 parents would be better. Noah was in the hallway. He heard enough. For almost 2 years afterward, he asked me every few months whether I was still keeping him. I told my mother that if she ever said anything like that again, she would not see either of us. She apologized, but not because she believed she was wrong. She apologized because access mattered to her. My father, Arthur Monroe, was different. He never spoke dramatically about love. He was a quiet man who labeled every drawer in his garage, kept a pencil behind his ear, and believed practical help was more honest than speeches. When Noah came into our lives, my father showed up with a second-hand workbench he had sanded and refinished. Every kid needs somewhere to take things apart, he said. Noah called him Grandpa Art before he called me Mom. My father taught him how to measure twice, how to oil a hinge, how to plant tomatoes deep enough that the stems grew strong. When Noah spilled orange paint across my father's workshop floor, my father looked at the stain and said, "Good. Now the place has a flag." 6 months before he died, my father changed the Monroe Family Education Trust. I did not know that at the time. The trust had been created decades earlier by my grandparents to pay for education, medical support, and emergency housing for Monroe descendants. My grandparents had money from farmland that became commercial property, and my father had managed the trust carefully. It was not enormous, but it was enough to matter. Enough to pay tuition, enough to cover medical bills, enough to keep someone from losing a house after a crisis. After Aaron died, my father told me he wanted Noah protected. "You are his mother," he said. "That makes him my grandson." I cried when he said it because nobody in my family had made it sound that simple before. When my father died from a stroke the following winter, my mother became acting family trustee. She told me the estate was complicated and that the trust did not apply to Noah because the adoption paperwork had been completed after Aaron's death and because Noah was not in Monroe by blood. I was grieving, exhausted, and trying to keep a child from falling apart. I did not have the strength to fight her. That was my mistake. For years, I let her decide the shape of the family. She paid for Harper's theater camps, Miles's baseball travel fees, Lily's private school testing, and even part of Tessa's kitchen remodel, because Tessa claimed the new breakfast nook created a better learning environment. When Noah needed $1,850 for a specialized robotics workshop, my mother told me the trust could not cover optional enrichment for non-descendants. I worked overtime at the claims office and paid it myself. When Noah needed therapy after a boy at school told him adopted kids were used kids, my mother said counseling was a parental expense, not a family expense. I sold Aaron's motorcycle and paid for 12 months of appointments. When Noah won smaller awards, my mother smiled tightly and said, "Isn't that nice?" Then she changed the subject to Harper's monologue, or Miles's batting average. I told myself Noah did not need their approval. That was true. But children notice who gets celebrated. They notice who receives envelopes with their name written in looping grandmother handwriting and who gets told, maybe next time. 3 months before the dinner at Alder House, I received a letter from a bank I did not recognize. It was addressed to me as Successor Trust Protector of the Monroe Family Education Trust. I almost threw it away because I assumed it was some estate marketing nonsense. Then I saw my father's signature on the copied page inside. The letter said the trust required a periodic compliance review and requested my confirmation of contact information. I read that sentence 4 times. Successor Trust Protector. Not beneficiary, not relative. Trust Protector. I called the number. A bank officer named Martin Shaw explained, carefully and awkwardly, that after my father's death, annual trust notices should have been sent to me. The bank had mailed them to the address provided by the acting trustee. My mother had provided an address I had not lived at since before Aaron died. For 7 years, notices about my legal authority had been going to an apartment building that had been demolished in 2021. Martin could not give me full details until I verified my identity, but he said something that made my hands go cold. Mrs. Ellis, your father's amendment is very clear. Your son is named. Named, not implied, not debated, named. I took 2 hours off work and drove to the bank. That afternoon, in a glass conference room that smelled like coffee and copier toner, I read the clause my father had added 6 months before his death. For purposes of this trust, the term grandchild shall include any child legally adopted by, under permanent guardianship of, or residing as a dependent child with any descendant, provided that descendant has accepted full parental responsibility. My grandson, Noah Aaron Ellis, shall be recognized in every respect as a Monroe grandchild. I covered my mouth so I would not sob in front of the bank officer. Below that paragraph was another clause. If any trustee or acting family representative knowingly denies benefits to a qualified child on the basis of adoption, guardianship, disability, parentage, or bloodline status, such trustee may be removed by written action of the trust protector after documented notice and review. My father had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. He had known my mother would try to draw a line around Noah and call it family tradition. Over the next 3 months, I did what my mother had always underestimated. I read everything. I reviewed distributions. I requested copies. I compared dates with family announcements and social media posts. I learned that in 7 years, the trust had paid $214,600 for the biological grandchildren and exactly $0 for Noah. Not $1 for therapy. Not $1 for robotics. Not $1 for summer science camp. Not $1 for the dental surgery I had put on a credit card and spent 18 months paying off. The money was not the deepest wound. The deepest wound was the paper trail proving that my mother had not simply misunderstood the trust. She had actively hidden it. She had signed annual certifications stating that all eligible grandchildren had been notified of available benefits. She had marked Noah as not applicable. In one email to the trust accountant, she wrote, "Rachel continues to blur emotional attachment with legal family status. Please do not encourage confusion by sending notices regarding the boy." The boy. That was what she called my son in writing, not Noah, not my grandson. Not. The boy. Angela Park, my father's estate attorney, agreed to meet me after I sent her the documents. She had retired from full-time practice, but still handled legacy matters for a few families. When she read the amendment, she removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Your father was worried about this," she said. My throat tightened. "About my mother?" Angela hesitated, then nodded. "He loved your mother, Rachel, but he knew she had a rigid idea of blood. He asked me to make the clause impossible to misinterpret." She misinterpreted it anyway. "No," Angela said. She ignored it. That was the first time an adult who knew my family said the truth plainly. Angela helped me prepare formal notice. We documented the missed distributions, the false certifications, and the concealed address. We also discovered something else. My mother had approved a pending trust distribution of $58,000 for my brother Colin, described as educational housing support for Harper's summer program. Harper's theater program lasted 4 weeks. The educational housing was actually a deposit on a beach rental Colin wanted to use for what he called client networking. Tessa had requested $23,400 for Miles's athletic development expenses. The invoices included baseball fees, yes, but also a luxury hotel, spa charges, and a designer luggage set. My mother approved both requests. The same week, she denied my request for $740 to cover replacement parts for Noah's science fair prototype after a pipe burst in our garage and damaged his equipment. Her note read, "Rachel must learn not to use the family as a substitute husband." I kept that one. Not because it surprised me, because one day I knew I might need to remember exactly who she chose to be when nobody was forcing her. The dinner invitation arrived while the legal review was already underway. My mother called and said she wanted to host a proper celebration for all the grandchildren. Her tone was sweet in the way frosting can hide a stale cake. "Noah worked very hard," she said. "It would be nice to recognize him." I almost said no. Then Angela advised me that if my mother continued to discriminate after receiving preliminary notice, the case for removal would be undeniable. So I accepted. I confirmed 2 adult meals and 1 child celebration meal, because Alderhouse required selections in advance. I saved the receipt. I saved the email. I saved the message from the event coordinator confirming that Noah's place card would read Noah Ellis Monroe, because my mother had insisted all the grandchildren use the Monroe name on the seating chart. When we arrived that evening, Noah was nervous but proud. He wore the blazer Aaron had bought too big during a clearance sale, joking that Noah would grow into his professor jacket. The sleeves finally fit. In the lobby, my mother kissed the air beside my cheek and looked Noah over. "Well," she said, "don't you look formal?" Noah smiled. "Thank you, Grandma Marianne." She winced slightly at Grandma, as if the word had touched a bruise. Inside the private dining room, the table glittered with candles and heavy silverware. At the children's end, 3 gold place cards were propped in front of small wrapped gifts. Harper Monroe, Miles Porter Monroe, Lily Monroe. Noah's place was beside mine, without a gift, without a gold card, with only a plain folded napkin. I asked the hostess whether there had been a mistake. She looked at her clipboard, confused. "I'm sorry. We were told to remove the 4th grandchild setting and keep a standard side seat." "Who told you?" Before she could answer, my mother appeared behind us. "I did," she said. "It made the table less crowded." Noah pretended to study the chandelier. I wanted to leave right then, but the black folder existed. The notices had been prepared. The bank officers were already on their way. And some part of me needed my mother to say the quiet part in front of witnesses. Dinner began with my mother making a toast. "To the Monroe grandchildren," she said, lifting her glass. "May they carry our name with excellence." Noah lifted his orange soda halfway, then noticed nobody was looking at him and lowered it again. Colin's daughter Harper received a silver charm bracelet for theater camp. Miles received a custom bat. Lily received a tablet for educational games, though she was 6 and mostly used screens to watch cartoons. Noah received a sentence. "And, of course, congratulations to Rachel's Noah for his little project," my mother said. Rachel's Noah, not our Noah, not my grandson. Rachel's Noah. Noah still smiled because he was 10 and generous enough to meet scraps with gratitude. Then the meals came. The adults received prime rib, crab cakes, truffle potatoes, and salads arranged like flowers. The children received the expensive kids' celebration plates my mother had selected. When the waiter reached Noah, he had nothing in front of him. He checked his list and whispered to another server. A moment later, the head waiter came over to my mother. "Mrs. Monroe, we have a note here that the 4th child is not included in the family package. Would you like us to prepare something separately?" My mother did not look embarrassed. She looked relieved that someone else had opened the door. "That's right," she said. "Plain pasta is fine, no dessert ticket." I said, I confirmed Noah's meal 3 weeks ago. My mother sighed. Rachel, don't start. I have the confirmation. I changed it. The table went quiet. Noah's cheeks turned red. I asked, why? My mother finally looked directly at him. Because this dinner is for Monroe grandchildren, and I am tired of pretending definitions do not matter. Nobody moved. Then she said the sentence. Noah is loved, I'm sure, but he is not real family. The sound in the room changed. I can only describe it as the sound of people realizing a line had been crossed, then waiting to see whether anyone powerful would call it a line. Colin looked down, but he was smiling. Tessa closed her eyes. Aunt Beverly whispered, Marianne. My mother lifted one hand. Oh, please. Everyone thinks it. I'm the only one honest enough to say it. The waiter stood there holding his order pad like he wished the floor would open. Noah whispered, Mom, can I go to the bathroom? He did not need the bathroom. He needed somewhere to be unseen. I touched his shoulder. No, you stay right here. Then I picked up my water glass, took one sip, and looked at my mother. I understand. Colin laughed under his breath. You understand? Yes, I said. I understand exactly what you are choosing to say in front of witnesses. My mother's eyes narrowed. Rachel. I stood. That was when Angela entered. The bank officers followed her. Martin Shaw carried a sealed envelope. The trust accountant, Priya Desai, carried a tablet. The county clerk's representative carried certified copies of documents I had requested 2 days earlier. My mother stared at them as if they had walked out of a nightmare she thought she had postponed. I did not raise my voice. Noah, sweetheart, this next part is not your burden. But I want you to hear it because you deserve to know the truth. He looked up at me, frightened but listening. I turned to the room. My father, Arthur Monroe, amended the Monroe Family Education Trust before he died. In that amendment, he named Noah Aaron Ellis as his grandson. My mother's fork slipped from her fingers and struck the plate. Across the table, Tessa dropped hers a second later. Then Harper's fork clattered down because children copy adults when they do not understand why the air has changed. No one spoke. I continued. That amendment did not ask for opinions. It did not invite family votes. It did not create a category called almost family. It said Noah is to be recognized in every respect as a Monroe grandchild. My mother stood so quickly, her chair scraped backward. This is not the place. You chose the place, I said. You chose the audience. You chose the sentence. Angela stepped forward. Mrs. Monroe, formal notice of trustee review was delivered to you 14 days ago. My mother's face flushed. That was a misunderstanding. Martin opened the sealed envelope. The review period closed at 5 o'clock today. Based on documented denial of benefits to an eligible child, false annual certifications, and continued discriminatory conduct after notice, Rachel Ellis has executed her authority as trust protector. Effective immediately, Marianne Monroe is removed as acting family trustee. The room went completely silent. Not polite silent. Not awkward silent. The kind of silence that happens when every person present starts recalculating who has power. Colin pushed back his chair. You can't just remove Mom from her own family trust. Angela looked at him. It is not her trust. It has never been her trust. Tessa's voice cracked. What does that mean? Priya answered this time. It means all pending distributions are frozen pending audit. It also means any prior distributions made under false certification may be subject to repayment. Colin's face changed. The beach rental flashed across it before he could hide it. Tessa gripped her wine glass. My mother pointed at me. You planned this. Yes, I said. I planned to handle it privately. Then you told a 10-year-old boy he was not real family while using trust money to buy gifts for every child except him. Colin snapped. This is about jealousy. You've always hated that Mom helps our kids. No, I said. This is about fraud disguised as favoritism. Aunt Beverly gasped. My mother said, Careful. For 7 years, I continued, You certified that all eligible grandchildren were notified of trust benefits. Noah was eligible. You knew he was eligible. You had my father's amendment. You changed my mailing address so I would not receive notices. You denied therapy reimbursement, education reimbursement, and medical reimbursement while approving private camps, travel baseball hotels, theater costumes, tablets, luxury rentals, and Tessa's home renovation. Tessa whispered, "The breakfast nook was for homework." I looked at her. "Tessa, the invoice included Italian tile and a wine fridge." Miles looked at his mother, confused. I immediately regretted saying it in front of the children, but that was the problem with public lies. The truth rarely arrives alone. I asked Angela if the children could be taken to the garden room with dessert. Noah grabbed my sleeve. "I want to stay." I crouched beside him. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, "but she said it about me." My mother looked away. That was the first time shame touched her face, but it did not stay long. Pride rushed back to cover it. "You are poisoning him against his family," she said. "No," I replied. "You are teaching him what happens when people use the word family as a weapon." Colin muttered, "This is insane." Angela opened the black folder. "Since Mrs. Monroe has chosen to contest the removal verbally in front of witnesses, we should clarify the immediate consequences. The pending $58,000 distribution requested by Colin Monroe is suspended. The $23,400 request submitted by Tessa Porter is suspended. The sale authorization for the Oak Hollow Lake property is also suspended." My mother's face went white. That was the announcement she had feared most. The lake property had belonged to my grandparents. It was where my father taught us to fish, where Aaron proposed to me, where Noah learned to skip stones. My mother had told everyone the property was too expensive to maintain and needed to be sold. What she had not told me was that Colin had already lined up a buyer. The buyer was a development group connected to one of his business partners. The sale price was nearly $180,000 below market value. And my mother had planned to use part of the proceeds to equalize family support, which apparently meant bailing out Colin's failed restaurant investment, paying off Tessa's credit cards, and leaving a small education account for Noah as proof of her generosity. I found the draft sale agreement during the document review. My father's trust required unanimous protector consent before any legacy property could be sold if a named grandchild used the property for educational, medical, or emotional rehabilitation purposes. Noah's therapist had written 2 reports describing the lake house as a stabilizing environment after Aaron's death. My mother had buried those reports in a file labeled miscellaneous. Angela did not bury things. She found them. Colin slammed his palm on the table. "You're going to destroy a 7-figure asset over some sentimental cabin?" I looked at him. "You were going to sell our father's favorite place to your friend at a discount and call it family planning. It was a smart financial decision. It was self-dealing. You don't know anything about business." "No," I said, "but I know enough about theft when it wears a blazer." My mother shouted my name. The room recoiled because my mother almost never shouted. She wounded with tone, with pauses, with the careful removal of warmth. Raised voices were for people she considered common. "You will stop this right now," she said. I saw the old reflex move through the room. People expected me to obey. I had obeyed for years in small ways. I had swallowed corrections. I had laughed off insults. I had accepted that my son's place in the family depended on whether my mother was in a generous mood. But the trust documents were on the table now. My father's signature was on the page. My son was sitting beside me. I said, "No." One word. The room seemed to lean away from it. My mother stared at me as if she had never heard the word from my mouth before. "No," I repeated. "You do not get to define my child out of the family and then spend the money left for him." Colin turned to the relatives. "Are you all hearing this?" She brought lawyers to a children's dinner. Aunt Beverly, who had been silent for most of my life whenever my mother became cruel, finally spoke. "No, Colin. Your mother brought cruelty to a children's dinner. Rachel brought proof. I will never forget my mother's face when Beverly said that. It was not anger first. It was betrayal. People like my mother often believe honesty is betrayal when it is no longer serving them. The children were taken out a few minutes later, not because I wanted Noah removed from the truth, but because the adults had begun discussing repayment, trust violations, and possible civil claims. Noah hugged me before he left. "Am I in trouble?" he whispered. I held his face in my hands. "No, you are the reason this finally became honest." He nodded, but his eyes were wet. After the doors closed, my mother changed strategies. She sat down slowly, pressed a napkin to her mouth, and became fragile. "I made mistakes," she said. "I am an old woman trying to hold a complicated family together." She was 64, healthy, and had spent the last month negotiating real estate documents with the focus of a trial attorney. But everyone at the table recognized the performance. It had worked for decades. If my mother could become wounded quickly enough, the person confronting her became cruel by comparison. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Your father left me with so much responsibility," Angela said gently. "Mrs. Monroe, Arthur left written instructions." My mother ignored her. "Rachel, you have no idea what it was like after he died. Everyone needed something. Colin's business was struggling. Tessa's marriage was falling apart. The grandchildren had opportunities. You were always so proud, so distant. You never asked properly." I almost laughed. "I asked for therapy reimbursement for Noah. You sent a receipt. That is how reimbursement works. You were cold. I was grieving. We were all grieving." "Yes," I said, "but only one of us used grief to erase a child from a trust." My mother flinched. Tessa began crying quietly. For a moment, I thought she might defend me. Instead, she said, "What happens to Miles's school fees?" That question told me more than her tears. Her first fear was not what had been done to Noah. It was whether the money would stop. Priya explained that legitimate education expenses could still be reviewed, but all distributions would require documentation, and any child previously excluded would receive corrective consideration. Colin leaned forward. "Corrective consideration means what? You're going to hand Rachel a check?" Angela replied, "It means the trust will calculate benefits Noah was eligible to receive and did not receive because of improper trustee conduct." "How much?" Priya looked at her tablet. "Preliminary estimate, excluding interest, is $49,780. My mother closed her eyes. I had not known the number until that moment. $49,780. I thought of the credit card interest, the extra shifts, the canceled dentist appointment. The time Noah asked why we could not go to the same science camp as Harper's friend because he had seen the brochure in my work bag. I thought of my mother approving a beach rental while telling me to be realistic. Colin said, "That's ridiculous. He's 10. What does a 10-year-old need 50 grand for?" "For the same reasons your children needed it," I said. "Because support is support when your kids receive it, and suddenly charity when mine does." Tessa wiped her face. "Rachel, you know we love Noah." "No," I said. "You like him when he is convenient. You love the version of him that does not cost you anything, challenge anything, or require you to disagree with Mom." She looked wounded, but she did not deny it. That was when my mother made her worst mistake of the evening. She said very softly, "Arthur only added that clause because Rachel pressured him when he was weak." Angela's posture changed. I knew then that my mother had stepped onto ground she did not understand. Angela removed one more document from the folder. "Arthur anticipated that claim," she said. My mother's eyes flicked to the paper. "This is a memorandum dictated by Arthur Monroe 8 days after he executed the amendment. He requested that I keep it with the trust records in case anyone argued he lacked clarity or had been pressured." She looked at me. "Rachel, you should decide whether you want it read aloud." I did not know the memorandum existed. For a second, I was no longer 37. I was my father's daughter, standing barefoot on the dock at Oak Hollow while he showed Noah how to untangle fishing line. I nodded. Angela read, "I am making this amendment because my grandson Noah has been treated as conditional family by people who know better. Rachel has not asked me for money or pressure. She has asked for peace. Peace is not the same as fairness. If I am gone and this document is needed, then I failed to say enough while I was alive. Let the record say clearly what I should have said at my own table. Noah is my grandson. Anyone who cannot accept that should not be trusted with what I built." Nobody breathed. Even Colin looked down. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time that night, I saw what my father's silence had cost us. He had seen the pattern. He had tried to correct it on paper, but paper cannot hug a child at dinner. Paper cannot interrupt a grandmother before she says the unforgivable thing. Paper cannot replace years of protection withheld. Still, that paper mattered. It was proof. And proof is sometimes the bridge between what happened and what people are finally forced to admit. My mother whispered, "He never said that to me." "No," I said. "Maybe he was afraid of your reaction. Maybe he thought the document would be enough. Maybe he made the same mistake I did and hoped you would become kinder if nobody challenged you too directly." Her tears returned, but they were different now. Less performed, more frightened. Because the version of my father she had used to defend herself had just spoken against her. The rest of the dinner dissolved into procedure. Angela served formal copies of the removal. Martin confirmed that my authority as trust protector had transferred oversight to an independent fiduciary until a permanent structure could be approved. Priya scheduled a full audit of 7 years of distributions. The lake sale was blocked before the buyer could file the final documents. My mother refused to sign acknowledgement. Angela informed her that refusal did not alter receipt. Colin left first, cursing under his breath and calling someone from the hallway. Tessa followed after him, asking whether the audit would affect reimbursements already spent. My relatives avoided my eyes, except Aunt Beverly, who touched my arm as she passed. "I should have said something sooner," she whispered. "Yes," I said. Her face crumpled slightly. I did not soften the answer. I was done making accountability comfortable. When Noah returned from the garden room, he carried a small plate of chocolate cake. He had eaten 2 bites. "Can we go home?" he asked. "Yes." As we walked through the restaurant lobby, my mother called after us. "Rachel." I stopped, but I did not turn Noah around. She stood beneath the chandelier, smaller than she had looked an hour earlier. I didn't mean to hurt him. Noah's hand tightened around mine. I turned back. "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't expect consequences." Then I took my son home. That night, Noah did not cry until we were in the kitchen. I made grilled cheese because it was the fastest food I could manage with hands that would not stop shaking. He sat at the counter, still wearing his blazer, his science fair certificate beside him. "Grandpa Art really wrote my name?" he asked. "Yes." "In the family thing?" "Yes." He looked at the sandwich. "Then why didn't Grandma Marianne care?" There are questions children ask that deserve better answers than adults have earned. I could have said she was confused. I could have said she loved him in her own way. I could have dressed the truth in soft clothing and handed it to him like every other adult had handed me excuses. Instead, I said, "Because some people think love has to match their rules before they respect it." She was wrong. He nodded slowly. Was Grandpa Art wrong for not telling her louder? I sat across from him. I think he tried. But yes, I wish he had protected you out loud while he was here. Noah took that in with the seriousness of a child who had been forced to understand adults too early. Then he said, "You did it out loud." I had to look away. Over the next few weeks, everything became uglier before it became cleaner. That is how truth often works in families. People imagine exposure as a single lightning strike. In reality, it is more like opening a wall and discovering the mold has reached rooms nobody suspected. The trust audit confirmed that my mother had approved $301,400 in distributions over 7 years. Some were legitimate, many were not. The problem was not that Colin's and Tessa's children had received support. I did not want money taken from children. The problem was that my mother had used the trust like a private reward system for the children she considered legitimate. She approved reimbursements without receipts when Colin asked. She questioned every form I submitted. She paid for Harper's voice coach under educational development. She denied Noah's speech therapy support because confidence issues are not medical. She approved Miles's baseball tournament travel in 3 states. She denied Noah's science camp transportation because Rachel can drive him herself. She reimbursed Tessa for a laptop Lily broke by dropping it in a bathtub. She denied Noah's refurbished laptop because public schools provide adequate computer access. Every line item told the same story. Some children were investments. Mine was an inconvenience. The independent fiduciary ordered corrective distributions into an education and wellness account for Noah. The amount, with interest and penalties, came to $57,260. I did not celebrate when the account opened. I sat in my car outside the bank and cried because every dollar represented a moment my son had been told to do, without while money meant for him went somewhere else. Colin tried to fight the frozen beach rental distribution by claiming the trip was necessary for Harper's networking in the performing arts. Harper was 13. Her networking consisted mostly of making friendship bracelets and singing in the shower. The claim was denied. Tessa returned several reimbursements voluntarily after her husband discovered the audit and demanded to know why trust money had paid for things he thought they had bought themselves. Their marriage did not collapse, but it cracked loudly enough that everyone stopped pretending Tessa had been an innocent bystander. My mother hired an attorney and claimed emotional distress. Then Angela produced the address change forms, the false certifications, the email calling Noah the boy, and the memorandum from my father. Her attorney advised settlement. As part of the settlement, my mother permanently resigned from any role connected to the trust, repaid a portion of administrative fees, and signed a statement acknowledging that Noah was eligible from the date of my father's amendment. She resisted the word grandson. That was the last thing she surrendered. The statement went through 4 drafts. In the first, she wrote, Rachel's adopted child. Angela rejected it. In the second, the minor child, Noah Ellis. Rejected. In the third, Arthur's named beneficiary. Rejected. Finally, in black ink on a Thursday morning, my mother signed a sentence that said, Noah Aaron Ellis is and has been a Monroe grandchild for all purposes of the Monroe Family Education Trust. When Angela emailed me the signed copy, I stared at that sentence for a long time. Legal recognition is not love. But sometimes it is the fence that keeps loveless people from doing more damage. My family group chat exploded after the settlement. Colin wrote that I had destroyed the family over technicalities. Tessa wrote that while Mom had made mistakes, I should have handled things privately. A cousin I barely knew said adoption was beautiful, but inheritance issues are complicated. Aunt Beverly replied with one sentence. What is complicated about stealing from a child? Nobody answered her. For the first time in my life, I left the group chat voluntarily. Not because I had been pushed out, because I was done standing in rooms where my son's humanity was treated as a debate topic. My mother tried to reach me through relatives, then through handwritten notes, then through gifts. The first package arrived 2 weeks after the settlement. It was a robotics kit worth more than $400. The card said, "For Noah, from Grandma Marianne." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a box expensive enough to pretend love had been purchased. I sent it back. The second package was a winter coat, then books. Then a check for $5,000 made out to me with, "For family healing," written in the memo line. I returned that too. Finally, my mother called from a number I did not recognize. When I answered, she began crying immediately. "I don't know what you want from me," she said. That sentence exhausted me. I want you to stop trying to skip the part where you admit what you did. I admitted it in the legal statement. You admitted eligibility. You have not admitted cruelty. Silence. Then she said, I was raised to believe blood mattered. You were also raised to write thank you notes and not wear white to weddings. You have changed plenty of rules when they inconvenienced you. She inhaled sharply. Do you enjoy speaking to me this way? No, I said. I learned it from listening to you. That landed. For once, she did not have a reply ready. I told her that if she wanted any future relationship with Noah, she would need to write him a letter. Not a gift, not a check. A letter that named exactly what she had said and why it was wrong. Then he would decide whether he wanted to read it. She said he was too young for that kind of burden. I said, he was not too young for you to humiliate him in a restaurant. She hung up. 3 months passed. During those months, Noah changed in small ways. He stopped asking whether he had to attend family events because there were no family events to attend. He joined a weekend engineering club funded partly through his corrected trust account. He built a second version of his water filter and presented it to his school board. When the principal introduced him as a young inventor with a remarkable sense of purpose, Noah looked at me and grinned. Not a careful grin. Not a please like me grin. A real one. That was worth more to me than every frozen distribution and signed statement. In February, a letter arrived. My mother's handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. I placed it on the kitchen table and told Noah what it was. You do not have to read it, I said. You can read it now, later, never, or ask me to keep it somewhere safe. He asked if I had read it. No. Can you read it first? Yes. I opened it after he went to bed. It was 3 pages. The first page was defensive. She wrote about her upbringing, her fear after my father died, her belief that the trust would be depleted if boundaries were not maintained. I almost stopped reading. Then the second page changed. She wrote, At Alder House, I said you were not real family. That was not confusion. It was cruelty. I said it because I wanted to put you below the other children, and because I resented that Arthur loved you without asking my permission. I was wrong. You did not deserve to earn a place I had no right to withhold. I sat very still. The letter continued. I have called myself traditional because it sounded better than admitting I was jealous of a child. Your grandfather gave you love freely, and instead of learning from him, I punished you for receiving it. That was the first sentence that sounded like truth. I gave the letter to Noah the next morning. He read it slowly at the breakfast table. When he finished, he folded it carefully. What do I do now? He asked. Nothing unless you want to. Is she still my grandma? That depends on what grandma means to you. He thought about it. Grandpa Art was easy, he said. Yes, I whispered. He was. I don't want to see her yet. Then you won't. He put the letter in his desk drawer. A week later, my mother asked if she could attend Noah's school exhibition. I told her no. Not because I wanted revenge, but because his first big public event after Alder House did not need to include the person who had humiliated him. She accepted that answer. That mattered. Accountability is not proven by one apology. It is proven by what a person does when forgiveness is not immediately granted. Colin did not learn that lesson. He remained furious. His restaurant investment collapsed after the beach rental money never came through. He told relatives I had weaponized adoption and turned Dad's paperwork into a cash grab. Then his daughter Harper asked to spend an afternoon with Noah because she wanted help with a stage prop involving pulleys. I said yes, but only if Colin did not come inside. Harper arrived with Aunt Beverly. She was quiet at first, then blurted out while Noah was looking for string in the garage. My dad said your mom hates us. Noah looked at me. I chose my words carefully. I don't hate you. I was angry that adults used money unfairly and hurt Noah. That is not your fault. Harper's eyes filled. I didn't know he didn't get stuff. I know. She helped Noah build the prop. They laughed for 2 hours. When she left, she gave him one of her theater stickers. It was shaped like a gold star. That evening, Noah stuck it on the corner of his science notebook. Revenge would have told him to reject her. Healing allowed him to decide for himself. Tessa changed more slowly. She sent me a message in April that said, "I don't know how to talk to you without sounding like I'm defending Mom." I wrote back, "Then start by not defending her." 2 days later, she came to my house with a folder of her own. She had gone through her reimbursements and marked the ones she knew were improper. Some were small, some were not. She cried when she admitted she had suspected the trust included Noah, but never asked because Mom made it sound settled. "Settled for whom?" I asked. She nodded. "I know." I did not hug her. Not then. But I accepted the folder. Over time, Tessa became the only sibling who tried to repair without demanding that I call repair forgiveness. She apologized to Noah in person. She did not ask to be called Aunt Tessa. She told him she should have spoken up at dinner, and that silence had helped Grandma Marianne hurt him. Noah listened, then asked if Miles still wanted to come over to test the water filter. Tessa cried harder. Children can be merciful without understanding how much mercy costs. Colin never apologized. My mother did eventually in person. It happened almost 9 months after Alderhouse at Oak Hollow. The lake property had not been sold. Under the new trust structure, it became a protected family use property with strict rules. No discounted sales. No private deals. No excluding legally recognized family members from access. Maintenance expenses were capped and transparent. Noah and I went up one Saturday in early autumn to close the dock for the season. I found my mother standing near the gravel drive when we arrived. She had asked Angela for permission to leave something in the cabin. Angela had told me. I had agreed to 10 minutes. My mother looked older, but not fragile, just less polished. She held a small wooden box. "Noah," she said, her voice trembling. "May I speak to you with your mother here?" Noah looked at me. I said, "Your choice." He nodded once. My mother opened the box. Inside was my father's old pocket compass, the one he used when we hiked behind the lake. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this when you were older," she said. "I kept it because I was angry that he had written your name where I did not think it belonged." Noah looked at the compass, but did not take it. My mother swallowed. "I was wrong. Your name belonged there because he loved you, and because your mother is your mother. I said you were not real family. That was cruel and false. I am sorry." Noah's face was unreadable. After a moment, he said, "You made my mom cry a lot." My mother's eyes filled. "I know. You made me feel like if I was better, maybe you'd change your mind." She covered her mouth. "I am so sorry." Noah looked at the lake. "Grandpa Art didn't make me feel like that." "No," she said. "He was better than I was." That was the first time I heard my mother compare herself to my father without trying to win. Noah took the compass, not from her hand, but from the box after she set it on the porch railing. "Thank you," he said. Then he walked down to the dock. My mother started to follow, but I stopped her. "Not yet." She nodded. Years earlier, she would have argued. That day, she simply stood beside me and watched Noah hold the compass up to the light. "I don't expect him to forgive me," she said. "Good." She flinched, then nodded again. "I don't know how to be in the family if I'm not the one deciding everything." That was the most honest thing she had said to me since my father died. I looked at the lake, at the dock, at my son standing where my father used to stand. "Maybe start by being a person instead of a judge." She gave a small broken laugh. "I may need practice." "Yes," I said. "You will." We did not become a happy family after that. Stories like this often end with one apology repairing everything. But real families are not repaired by music swelling under the final scene. They are repaired by repeated choices nobody applauds. My mother went to therapy. Not family therapy at first. Individual therapy, because I refused to carry her regret for her. She learned to say "my grandson Noah" without looking like the words scraped her throat. She learned to send birthday cards without checks inside. She learned that an invitation declined was not an attack. Sometimes she failed. When she said, "I just miss when everyone was together," I answered, "Everyone was not together. Some of us were just quiet." She did not like that, but she stopped arguing. The trust became boring, which is exactly what a trust should be. Receipts were submitted, requests were reviewed. Children were supported according to written rules instead of emotional rank. Noah's education account paid for his engineering club, therapy, summer environmental program, and later a regional competition in Ohio, where his filter won a sustainability award. At that competition, a judge asked him what inspired his work. Noah said, "My grandpa taught me that fixing small things before they break can save people later." I cried in the back row, not loudly. I have learned that some grief deserves privacy, even when the healing happens in public. After the awards, Noah asked if we could stop for pasta on the way home. For a second, I felt Alderhouse rise in my chest again. The plain pasta, the missing dessert ticket, my mother's voice saying he was not real family. Noah saw my face and rolled his eyes in the affectionate way children do when they are tired of adults being symbolic. "Mom," he said, "pasta is not the villain." So we stopped. He ordered fettuccine with extra parmesan and ate like a boy who had spent the day being seen. That was when I understood something I had been too angry to see before. The goal was never to make Noah hate everything connected to that night. The goal was to make sure that night did not define what he believed he deserved. My mother's sentence had been cruel, but it was not prophecy. Noah was real before she admitted it. He was family before the trust recognized it. He was loved before the room dropped its forks. The announcement did not make him belong. It forced everyone else to confront the fact that he already did. A year after Alderhouse, we held a small gathering at Oak Hollow for Noah's 11th birthday. Not a Monroe event. Not a performance. Just people who could follow the rules of kindness. Aunt Beverly came. Tessa came with Miles. Harper came with a handmade card. My mother came for 1 hour, brought no gifts beyond a book Noah had mentioned, and asked before taking pictures. Colin was not invited. Before cake, Noah asked if he could say something. My whole body tensed because mothers remember wounds even when children are standing strong. He climbed onto the porch step, holding a paper cup of lemonade. "Last year was weird," he said. Everyone laughed softly because there are times when a child's understatement is more devastating than any adult speech. He continued, "I used to think family was people who couldn't leave. But Mom says family is people who are responsible with your heart." He looked at my mother. "Some people are still learning." My mother pressed her napkin to her eyes. Noah looked at me. "I'm still learning too, but I know I'm real." That was all. No dramatic music, no courtroom, no final punishment. Just a boy on a porch, claiming a truth adults had tried to make complicated. Later, after everyone left, I found my mother standing near the kitchen sink, washing plates by hand, even though the cabin had a dishwasher. "You don't have to do that," I said. "I know." She kept washing. After a while, she said, "When I said he wasn't real family, I think I was trying to protect the version of family where I still mattered most." I leaned against the counter. "And now? Now I think that version was too small to hold everyone your father loved." I did not answer. She dried a plate. "I am sorry I made you fight so hard for what should have been obvious." That apology reached a place the earlier ones had not. Maybe because she did not ask for anything afterward. No hug, no reassurance, no promise that the past was over. Just a sentence left on the counter between us. I let it stay there. Some people think boundaries are walls built from anger. Mine became doors with locks. People could enter, but not while carrying the same weapons. My mother was allowed limited time with Noah because she accepted correction. Tessa was allowed back because she told the truth about her silence. Beverly became part of our lives because late courage is still courage when it becomes consistent. Colin remained outside because he wanted access without accountability. That distinction saved us. I used to believe family meant enduring the people who shared your history. Now, I believe family is proven by how people behave when your dignity costs them something. My son learned that lesson younger than I wanted him to. But he also learned something I did not learn until 37. You do not have to audition for a place that already belongs to you. The night at Alder House did not destroy my family. It revealed which parts had been held together by fear, money, silence, and my willingness to absorb pain quietly. My mother said my son was not real family. Then one announcement made everyone drop their forks. But the real silence was not the silence in that dining room. It was the silence that ended afterward. The silence where I stopped explaining away cruelty. The silence where my son stopped apologizing for existing. The silence where people who had benefited from unfairness waited for me to make them comfortable, and I did not. If you have ever been told that keeping the peace means accepting humiliation, I hope you remember this. Peace without truth is only obedience with better manners. Family without respect is only a name people use when they want access to your forgiveness. And love that requires a child to become smaller so adults can feel bigger is not love at all. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up at the table, open the folder, say the truth clearly, and let the forks fall where they may.